some beers are handmade beers, but our beverage, or most important beverage, is wine. We produce Malbec.
In Brazil we have cachaça.
Sí. It's a good cachaça.
So you will taste our grappa. Grappa is completely different from other spirits, being made distilling a very aromatic raw material, which is the skin of the grape. There are different kinds of grapes, different kinds of wines, both white wines, red wines, and therefore you can have different kinds of grappas. Each of them will carry the taste and the aromas coming from the grape. So I think you will enjoy some grappas at the end of the tour. Okay? So I leave you to the lovely hands of the Thank you for being here. Enjoy the visit.
Thank you.
Grazie.
So guys, Mr. Poli, Mr. Jacopo Poli belongs to the 4th generation of grappa makers. So I will shortly go back to the first generation, well, even a little bit, actually even a little bit sooner than that. The Poli family is originally coming from a small village not far from here called Marostica. Marostica is a beautiful medieval village located more or less 3 kilometers away from here. What do we know about the Poli family? Back in the 15th century, there was a very rich farmer called Polo, that means Paolo in Italian, or Paulo probably in Portuguese. And Mr. Polo had 4 fields and 40 cows. That's not so much nowadays, back in the 15th century, but you may imagine what that meant back in the 15th century having 40 cows. He became a famous man and he gave over the own name to the family, which became from Polo, basically became the Polis. That was now the 15th century. We are going to find the Poli family once again in 1885. In 1885, the Poli family moves from Marostica to this village because back in 1885, a new train line, a railway line, was opened just in front of this building. So the Poli family moves to this building, turns this building into what we call osteria in Italian. An osteria is a kind of small restaurant where you can have something easy to drink or to basically eat. The train was stopping in front of our osteria. People were getting off the train, coming inside, having a sandwich, a glass of wine, and then they were jumping back into the train to carry on with the journey. Mr. Giobatta Poli actually had a passion, a hobby, let's say, which was the one of distilling grappa. So he was already selling some grappa hidden behind the counter when he had his osteria. Slowly, Mr. Giobatta Poli decides to close the osteria and the whole family starts distilling grappa in 1898 officially. This means that we have been making grappa for more than 115 years now. Later on, we had the First and the Second World War. For your information, Italy was, especially this part of Italy, was severely bombed during the First and the Second World War. However, the distillery never stopped making grappa. When men were busy fighting, ladies were coming here to make sure that more and more grappa would be produced. This was throughout the First and also the Second World War. Starting from the 50s and starting from the 60s, the Poli family had big problems to face, and these big problems were called industrialization. Starting from the 50s, local people were able to buy big plants to make grappa from Canada or from the United States of America, and what we are going to see later on is not a huge big factory or plant of grappa makers. We still are an artisanal company. So Jacopo's father was about to close the distillery in the 50s because they were not able to stand this huge amount of cheap industrial grappa. Later on, the public appreciated our grappa. The public appreciated the fact that we now open even to Grappa Museum, and now the grappa business is actually going very, very good. We are probably exporting more than 50% of what we produce in here. We have traditional markets for grappa. These markets are called Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Sweden, because all these people are really used to have holidays here in Italy. They just need, well, I talk about Austrians or German people, they need 4 or 5 hours with the car, they hit the Alps, come down to Italy, and then they go to the seaside. It's not as beautiful as Brazil, but we have to do to manage with it. So they are used to find grappa and drink grappa. In the last 10-15 years, we also started exporting loads of grappa to other markets like Japan, Israel, Canada, and the United States. And in the last 10 years, we were also able to sell some grappa in Brazil, because there's loads of Italians, originally Italians in Brazil, and sometimes they feel a little bit homesick. They don't have the means to do the grappa in their houses, so they just buy our bottles. So, down there on the picture, you may see the Poli family as it is nowadays. The man on the right-hand side, well, you probably recognize him. This is Jacopo Poli. The picture was taken back in 1998 to celebrate the century from the foundation of the distillery. Then you have Miss Barbara Poli, Jacopo's sister. She's the one looking after the administration in our company. And then you have the youngest son, who is called Andrea Poli, and he's the one looking after the process of grappa making, and he's the one welcoming the people from the customs, aduana, I don't know if you know customs office. Yeah. Alcohol undergoes special taxes in Italy, just like in any other country, so this custom officer usually pay us a visit just to make sure that we're not hiding any alcohol, so he's the one welcoming these people. So as you can see, this is the 4th generation. The 5th generation is ready, but for the moment they are small, they're still going to school, so no pressure. In a couple of years they will take the company. This was a short presentation of the company. Maybe you have some questions to ask me, or if you're okay, I hope you understand my English as well. Yes. Good. So if you have no questions, I will take you on for the second part of a guided tour. Please, go ahead with your question.
I'm sorry. How many people are actually working in the industry right now?
In our company, we have a bit less than 30 people working in our company. You have to understand that sometimes it's even a strong seasonal job for us. That means especially in September, October, November, when we have to distill grappa, then we probably hire 5, 6, 7 people more to help us out with the process of grappa making. And then from January, February, we start back with 30 people. So just think around the 30 people, more or less. Jacopo?
May I add a few more to what you described as a part of our family history, about the history of grappa as a whole, as in general, because grappa, as I told you before, is the national spirits, and they went through various phases. At the very beginning, I'm talking about a couple of minutes ago, grappa was considered a very simple product for simple people. So grappa was mainly made by farmers that just needed to warm up by drinking grappa, to warm up during the very cold winters that we have here in the northern part of Italy. Originally, grappa comes from the northern part of Italy, because that is where the climate is colder. In the central and in the southern part of Italy, people do not really need to warm up, they need to refresh, and that's why they mainly prefer liqueurs like anise-based liqueurs, or limoncello, something to refresh. While in the northern part of Italy, farmers, people living in the mountain, they need the grappa as a source of energy. Okay?
Yes.
The technology in those days was very poor, and as a consequence, the kind of grappa, the quality of the grappa that was made in those days was also very rough. A grappa that was, I would say, unpleasant. And only those who were really used to drink that kind of tough spirits could drink it. Today, that kind of grappa would not be accepted in this modern society, being too rough, aggressive, pungent, heavy to digest. The evolution in the technology began at the end of the 1800, la fine del Settecento, all'inizio dell'Ottocento.
The end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century.
Okay. Thanks to the evolution in the wine-making process, there was also an evolution in the technique of distillation of the skin of the grape, the leftover of the winemaking process. And therefore, new steels, new alembics, new machines, new apparatus for making grappa were created, giving a grappa that was a little bit better compared to the grappa that was made before, but still very, very tough. Grappa was mainly sold in bulk, which means that the grappa was not bottled as we see today. People used to go to the distillery with their own bottle, and the bottle was filled directly at the distillery. There was no label, and often there were problems of, come si dice, prodotti contraffatti.
Produto contrabandeado.
Forged.
Forged, yes.
Okay, so products that were not really well made, and this is the reason why in 1933, since 1933, grappa by law has to be bottled in a bottle in which is put a label where is written the name of the producer, the percentage of alcohol, and the quantity, the net quantity inside the bottle. So since 1933, we see the bottles of grappa as we see today. So is kind of modern products, so only less than 400 years that we see the bottles of grappa as we see today. Still a very simple product. In the meantime, the market was growing, mainly because of the First and the Second World War. Grappa, again, was a local product, okay, known only in the northern part of Italy, mainly in the area of Veneto, Friuli, Trentino, Piemonte, okay. But in the central part and the southern part of Italy, it was unknown. Till the First World War, when many soldiers from the central and the southern part of Italy were forced to come to the northern part of Italy to fight against the Austrians, against the enemy. And in that occasion, they were exposed to this spirit that was given to the soldier to help them to face those tough days. And that's how grappa became a kind of national spirit. During the First and during the Second World War. After the Second World War, the cost of labor was very, very low in Italy. The method of distillation of the skin of the grape was a labor-intensive process that required a lot of workers, but that was not a problem because there were many workers available, farmers that were more than happy to come in the winter time and in the fall in a distillery to work in a warm ambience because they had nothing to do in the fields. Okay, the situation changed when the cost of labor began to increase because of the come si dice, negli anni 60 il boom economico, when there was the economic boom.
The 60s,
The
it was
60s.
a very booming economy.
Exactly. And the cost of labor became higher and higher. Let me give you a very short example. This is a letter that my grandfather wrote to my father while my father was in the army in 1942, okay, Second World War, and he was taking care of the distillery. And he wrote this letter just to give some information about how the activity was doing. And he wrote that in that specific year, they bought 2,000 tons of orujo, okay, grape skin, the raw material. And for these 2,000 tons, he paid 1 million lire. 1 million lire. It took 6 months to distill these 2,000 tons. And the cost of labor of these 6 months was 120,000 lire. So 1 million was the cost of the raw material, 120,000 was the cost of the labor. So approximately 1/10 of the cost of the raw materials. This was the situation in 1942. In the 60s, this relation was completely the opposite. The cost of labor was much higher compared to the cost of the raw material. And this was the reason why some distilleries tried to find a way to distill that was not labor intensive, that was automatized, in order to save cost of labor. And that's how the new modern industrial steels, industrial alembics came. Before, there were nearly 2,000 small distilleries like these, using the so-called discontinuous pot steel. A pot steel, discontinuous pot steel is an alembic where you put the skin into the pot, is a pot. You distill the pomace. At the end of the distillation cycle, you get the grappa, you remove the pomace, and you start again with a new cycle of distillation. It's a batch distillation. Okay. Pot steel because it's made with pot, and it works by small batches. Of course, it takes time to remove the pomace and to introduce new pomace, so that's why it's a labor-intensive process. So the idea of the industrial distilleries was to create a steel that didn't need to load and unload. The pomace were continuously introduced and continuously removed. So there were no, come si dice, fermi macchina, come si dice Alberto, tempi di attesa, waiting time between one cycle and the next. Okay. So 2,000 tons, 6 months of labor in 1842. The same quantity, these distilleries that were created in the 60s, they could have distilled the same quantity in 10, 15 days. Okay? 6 months, 15 days. So you can imagine how tough was the competition and how the small artisan distilleries like this distillery had no chance to face the tough competition of these new industrial distilleries. And most of them were forced out of business. There were 2,000 distilleries operating with the traditional pot batch steel, and in a matter of few years, most of them disappeared, and today only 90, less than 90 out of the 2,000 that were existing are still in business. And this distillery is one of those 90 distilleries that are still using the traditional way of distillation. The traditional grappa, the artisan grappa, the handcrafted grappa today represents less than 20% of the total production. More than 80% is made by means of this new industrial technology that is less expensive and in terms of quality gives I would say, grappa that is more anonymous, flat. No defect, but no great quality, let's say an industrial mass production. Okay. So, in the 70s, the industrial grappas became so strong that they began to use some marketing tools. Marketing was at its first stage in those days. They began to make advertising, to use testimonial. Some of these activities became very popular in Italy. Certain distilleries became brands, because most distilleries were known only in the local market, in the area where they were working. But these distilleries, these industrial distilleries, I'm talking about 10, 15 distilleries, not more than that, became national brands, known on the entire national territory. The distribution was a key, because in those days the distribuzione organizzata, supermarket, was also moving its first step. So marketing, distribution, price, the product was very cheap. The quality of the product was okay, everybody was happy. And in the 70s, the quantity of grappa that was sold reached the highest level ever reached in the history of grappa, 70 million bottles of grappa. Okay? 70 million bottles of grappa that were distributed throughout the new channel of the organized distribution, the supermarkets, promoted by means of the new marketing tools at a very convenient price. The quality was okay, and the sales were at the highest level ever. Many small distilleries were disappearing. These big giants had no barriers in front of them. But somehow something didn't work. 70 million bottles in 1970. In a matter of 10 years, 10, 12 years, from 70 million, 65, 60, 55, 50, 45, 40, 35 million bottles. In a matter of 10, 12 years, half of the sales were gone. And I do remember that when I was younger and I joined the company and I was in my 20s, and I went with my father and my uncle at the meeting of the distillers. They were always talking about these big cries and grappa was dead, the customers were leaving, and everybody was asking why they don't like grappa. The grappa is very cheap, the quality is okay, and the distribution is there. We are promoting the product by using the modern technique of communication, marketing, this and that. What's wrong? What's wrong? And that was the question, what was wrong? And that's when me, my brother, my sister, we began to think what was wrong. What was wrong in this concept of mass production? Grappa, the idea of these distilleries, these industrial distilleries, was to use the most modern technology available. Farmers could come from no matter what kind of grape variety. Farmers could come from any region. So I understood that the mistake was that this industrial distillery cut the roots of the products. they cut the link between the products and the territory from which the grape is coming from. They cut the link between the grappa and a specific variety, and the biggest mistake, they cut the link between grappa and the family that was behind the company, because these companies were industrial companies in the sense that there was no soul, no people behind, just managers that aimed at the biggest quantity, the biggest turnover, the biggest profit, forgetting the meaning of the product, what the product meant to the customer, what the values were behind the label, okay? And these values are so deep. The values of Grappa are the values of the friendship, the sincerity, the genuinity, the honesty, the transparency, okay? These were the values that were embodied by the families that were producing this product. And these families were gone because the small distilleries were gone. The new technology was interesting, but that was not enough. The technology is just technology. The price is just price. The distribution is just distribution, but there must be a story behind. There must be behind the product. There must be a dream. There must be some life, some soul. When you say cachaça, when you say rum, when you say vodka, when you say cognac, immediately in your brain something starts. When I say cognac and I ask you, close your eyes, what is the music you are listening when I say the word cognac? And you feel a certain music. But if I say vodka, there is another music. If I say cognac, what is the color? Okay. And if I say vodka, there is
Delicious.
another color. If I say rum, there is another color. There is another music. Are you alone when you drink rum? Are you with someone? Are you in the mountain or are you on the beach? Is it a nice, warm, sunny day, or is it cold? When I say rum, you see a certain situation, okay? And when I say cachaça, you think to caipirinha, you think to many things. And these are links, emotional links, that are not written anywhere, they just exist. And nobody ever told you that when I say cachaça, you immediately start imagining a certain situation. When I say vodka or tequila or calvados or grappa, there is another situation. It's not written, it's just in the air, it's just in the air.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the big mistake. These people made everything was artificial. Everything was made planned. Everything was very, very well planned. But they forgot the soul. So at the beginning of the 80s, a few distilleries that were still alive from the artisan side, they said, okay, we learned how to distill a better quality because we learned from the industrial distillery how to better use our traditional steel. Because we learned, we are using the traditional steel, but in the meantime, we learned how to use it in a better way in order to make a better grappa that was more elegant, more refined, better suited to the contemporary taste, but at the same time respecting the tradition. We learned how to... Ciao, amore.
Nice picture, eh?
So we learned how to treat